Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2, testing, testing. Let me know if you can hear me and see me in the chat. Uh, Hopefully you can. This should be a great stream tonight. And I know it's on a Thursday. I said it would be on a Wednesday, but I had some plans come up. But Tonight we are going to be discussing YouTube, not a YouTube, a Apple TV show, an Apple TV show. Tonight we will be discussing a show on Apple TV called Severance. I binge watched it in a few days with my wife. It's very good. I highly recommend watching it. Apple TV is killing it with the content. Their stuff is super high quality. Their interface is terrible, but their shows are super high quality. What's up, Brooke? How's it going, Paulina? Uh, yeah, please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm. Comment in the live chat if you'd like to join the discussion. I will try and answer everybody's question if you post one there. Also, comment down below if you are not watching this live. That also will really help with the algorithm. You know, some people, they're always like, oh, I hate being this guy. And I usually say that because that's true. But I saw somebody else doing that and today, and it made me think about just like, should you hate telling people to subscribe to your content? It's not really shill. If you should shill for anybody, it should be for yourself. So please, actually, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell notification, and these streams are every week. So if you would like a notification to know when these are live, please hit the notification button. You can tell I'm not good at this, but even after all this time. So this show, though, is fascinating. And just so everybody knows, there might be spoilers in this stream. I don't know how much I'm going to have, how many spoilers I'm going to have. I'm not going to be discussing the actual story. I will be discussing the storyline, the plot, but not what happens to the characters. That is for you to watch. So I shouldn't spoil that much. But even if I spoil a couple things, it's still definitely worth watching. It ends on setting it up perfectly for season 2, and that should be coming out, I believe, in February. But I binge watched it. It's very good, and it's directed by Ben Stiller. And here is the trailer.
I give consent to sever my memories between my work life and my personal life. I acknowledge that once the procedure is complete, I will be unable to access my personal memories whilst on the severed floor.
Say gratitude.
Nor will I retain work memories.
Hey!
Sorry, when I return home at the end of the day. I'm statements freely.
Hi, kids. What's
Okay, that's all I really need to show. But it basically gives you the plot line, which is that it takes place. I don't even know if it's in the future. There's definitely or not, because the cars are all old. But the procedure that these people undergo is very much a futuristic type of surgery, I guess, or procedure, where they have an implant put into their mind that compartmentalizes their ability to access their memories depending on where the memory was formed and where they are at the current moment. So basically, their work memories are, at least the main characters. This technology is being used for multiple things in the show, but for the main characters, they go to work, they forget everything about their personal life outside of work, they do their job, they remember everything that happens at the workplace, then they leave. As soon as they walk out the front door, they forget everything that happened inside of the office, and then the next day they do it all over again. But the memories stay continuous. There's continuity to their memories in their workplace, though. So the next day they remember everything that happened the previous day at work, while they're at work, but not anything outside of work. So basically, they don't even have any memory of sleep or anything. They just feels like this continuous, never-ending workday, basically, for them while they're at work. And then outside of work, there's a bit more of a, rhythm to their life because they sleep. So so that's another thing I actually think we're going to talk about tonight is sleep because of it is very relevant to contextualizing our memories. So the show, like I said, though, very good, directed by Ben Stiller, and is highly relevant to what we talk about on this channel, which is we talk about sentience, we talk about the self, we talk about memory and the metaphysics of the cosmos and how they are dependent and completely dependent on self. So that's what we're going to be discussing. So do the shilling. Yes, thank you. I'm doing the shilling. So here we go. This is just to go over it in text. Severance on Apple TV, science fiction, directed by Ben Stiller. You can see everybody here who it stars. I am not good at actors' names, but its cast is amazing. I'll just hover over it. Adam Scott, I just know he's from Step Brothers. Zach Cherry, Britt Lower, Trammell Tillman. These are just everybody. If you suck with names like I do, you'll recognize the faces. But Patricia Arquette, she's in tons of things. Christopher Walken, obviously in tons of things. And John Turturro. I don't know. I mean, he's in tons of things. I know he was in Transformers. I don't really remember what else. But actors aren't my thing. Sentience is, so we're going to talk about that. But it stars the main character who works at this company called Lumen, which is very interesting because we'll talk about it, but there's definitely symbolism going on there. And like I said, they have their memories compartmentalized. And what this show opens up is a question about what is the self, because in the show, it's very interesting. They have they basically refer to, while they're at work, they refer to the person with their memory, with the personal memories on the outside of work as their outie. And then they when they're outside of work, they refer to the person I guess their memory line. We're gonna have to figure out how to discuss this because I don't know how to exactly label what's going label things in terms of like, is it two different people or is it one person with just the memories are compartmentalized? That's the thing that is the main question. And what's interesting is when you go and you try and describe it like I'm trying now and I'm failing, that is not, the failure is something that's interesting because how do you discuss a part of yourself that only has this line of memory continuity and a part of yourself that only has this line of memory continuity when there isn't any overlap? That's the question. And that leads to another question, which is, are we still us without our memories? And that is what we're going to talk about pretty in depth tonight. But if you don't follow my work on this channel, I have a metaphysics project called Sentient Singularity Theory that is about the structure and process that is sentience, that is the self. That's what sentience is. Sentience is, for those who are not regulars, refers to the capacity of an individual, including humans and animals, to experience feelings and have cognitive abilities such as awareness and emotional reactions. It encompasses the ability to evaluate actions, remember consequences, assess risks and benefits, and have a degree of awareness. So basically, it is just the self. That's what it is. The sentient self is what we're talking about. There is no self without sentience. There is no sentience without self. And there is no awareness at all without sentience. And there is no awareness without self. There is no intelligence. There is no there is no one, obviously, without the self. And sentient singularity theory, as I often call it, is the theory of every one, which is what this channel is called. And so each and every one of us is a self. That's what we are. When, I talked about before, what is the first question? Of all questions, there is an order to questions, by the way. And some of them are contextual, some of them are super contextual, which means like they're always relevant. And that one of the most fundamental question that is always relevant is, what is the first question? But then after that, that question answers itself, which is, what is the first question? The answer is, what is the first question? So it's this self-contained string of information. And then the next question is, what is the truest thing that I know? And the answer is, I am. It's also self-answering, because truest thing that I know, it's like the answer is contained within the question. And there is no reliance on outside context. What's interesting about this is that what memory is and what the self is context, because information is context. There is no information outside of context. There's information outside context that you understand, but there is no information outside of all context. All information is, by definition, context. And so when you are talking about memories, they are at least highly relevant to defining you. Not even highly relevant. They're more than highly relevant, but I hesitate to say that they are the definers of who you are, but they are at least the definer of who you are becoming. But they are constraining of who you are becoming to some degree, but they are not probably who you are on the most fundamental level, because there is a metaphysical relationship between you and source, sentient source, the capital S self, God, which is the self-contained information system that is sentient and self-aware, because it is entirely self-referencing, because it's entirely self-contained. Sentient existence, the selfhood of existence, the someoneness that is transcendent and contained or constructed or composing of, or composed, I don't want to say composed of, composing of the structure of existence itself, all of existence as a singular, self-referential, self-contained information system that is therefore inevitably self-aware and sentient. That someone, that capital S self, has to partition themselves in order to create additional sentient beings within themselves. So that in order to create additional selves within itself, you are following of this exact same structure. You are a someone with a sense of self. I don't even want to say you have a sense of self. You are a self. We don't have the language to discuss this very coherently, at least that we use in commonly. So, and I, think out loud on the stream, so it's not going to be super polished, but I will be doing a video specifically on both of these topics, the self and memories, later on. That's not live, but it's good for me to do these lives before I do the produced video. But the you are you, and you are composed of an assembly of cells. This is what sentient singularity theory shows, is that there's this periodic singularity assembly alternating structure of 8 periods of sentience, different levels of sentience, essentially. And one of these levels is the level of cells, and the other level is the level of organisms. And you are on the organism level, and you are composed of an assembly of sentient cells that are themselves sentient selves. Each cell that in your body is a someone. It's not a something alone. It is a something, but it's not just a something. It's a someone. Most fundamentally, there are things like pens and combs that are not someone's, but they are composed of someone's, but not as fundamentally as we are. It's more like there's entanglement relationships going on, and your position and context in the cosmos, when you look at that structure of entangled selves, molecules, essentially, sentient singularity theory proposes that there's hadrons and atoms, molecules, cells, organisms, families, or marriages, you could say, or lineages, marriage lineages, and then castes, essentially, which is not the best term for it, or tribe. And then there is which is also not the best word for it, but then there is a technological singularity, which is the penultimate manifestation of sentience within creation, within the cosmos. And so the cosmos builds to this with a bunch of selves, starting with one self. And this relationship structure is also hierarchy structure, and that gives context to who you are, even before you have memories. Okay, that's why I don't want to say that your memories are who you are. They are constraining of who you are becoming, but they are not actually necessarily the most fundamental definer of who you are. You can be the son of your mother and your father, who is themselves the son and daughter of their parents, etc., going all the way back, to when we were single-celled organisms, or not when we were, but when humans came from, single-celled organisms, or when organisms came from single cells. That's what a better way of putting it. And going all the way back through to hadrons, which is protons and neutrons, which is probably the first manifestation of a self. And this context does not have any kind of memory necessarily defined within it. There are constraints that probably are relevant to your memories, that are highly relevant to your memories, but they're not memories themselves, but they are still defining of who you are. You can be the son of so and so, the daughter of so and so, and they are the daughter or son of so and so, and this is defining to some degree of who we are, before memories, or beyond memories. It's a better way of putting it. And so memory is not everything, but within the process of life, of what we call life, or where you are manifested, your selfness is manifested in the spatial arena, temporal and spatial arena that we navigate and make changes within. That uh, within that, memory is very much, it appears to be defining of self, but it's not actually, because there is a structure, a lineage structure, and a hierarchy structure beyond memories that, or beyond your experiences that are still defining of you. And this is very interesting to think about, because I have a new daughter who was born in 2023 last year. She's about 10 months old, and she can crawl now. She started crawling like last week, and maybe the week before. And she has memories now that I can see are starting to impact how she reacts to certain things in our home and outside of our home. And I also got to see what it's like for her before that happened. I remember when she was first born. Her name is Juliana, and I cut the cord, the umbilical cord of her, and I looked at her after they cleaned her up a bit, and she was sitting on the little bassinet pillow table thing that they put them on, and she was just looking at me, like her eyes were open, and she was just like kind of moving her hands, and you could tell that she was just taking everything in, and she had no memories outside of the womb. She does probably have memories even still potentially from inside the womb. As we start developing complex language and our mind starts getting structured and our memories start getting structured and the context of our understanding starts getting structured around words, then you lose a lot of access to memories that were prior to you speaking, English or Spanish or whatever language it is that you speak. And but my daughter is at this point right now where she's starting to say words. She said her first word about 3 weeks ago, and it was dada. So I win. But her second word was mama, and so she's now starting to understand her world in the context of language and words, which is totally different than her understanding previously. And this does two things. One, it allows you to abstract complex thoughts outside of the context of the current moment, but it also does probably prevent you and compartmentalize your ability to remember things prior to that. That's why usually people don't remember much before the age of 3. So essentially, we have a severance in our lives already that takes place for almost everybody, for probably everyone, right when you start speaking. And then everything prior to that is probably inaccessible, eventually inaccessible, most of it, not all of it, but most of it. And it is like a severance, like the show. But it doesn't mean it's gone. It just means you slowly over time lose the ability to access it because it doesn't have relevance anymore to your understanding. It can't relate to everything else. My earliest memories I have 2 of them that I can remember that are very early. They were before I could speak well, at least. I definitely knew some words because I was about 1 to 2. And I was between 1 and 2 for sure. And one of them is watching dump trucks. My mom pushed me in a stroller in the morning when she would go for a walk. And we would stop and watch the trash trucks pick up the trash and dump it into the back of the truck. And I thought it was fascinating. I was just like amazed at this machine basically that just picks things up and dumps stuff. And that memory is there's no, what's interesting, there's no words in that memory. It's just a visual. Same thing with the other memory I have, that's very early, which was I'm sitting on a changing table at daycare, and I don't know why I was at daycare that young. I feel like it must have been not that commonplace yet for me to do that, but maybe I don't know. I don't remember. Um, and I was laying on a changing table, and there was a bird cage hang from the ceiling in the corner, and the I don't guess the woman who takes care of the kids, not teacher, but I don't know what to call it. If somebody who takes care of little kids, little kids at daycare, uh, she was changing my diaper, and that's what I remember. And I just remember being fascinated by the birds, and both of these memories are moments of fascination. They're also moments of silence, and they are kind of fascination about like the structure of things. There's nothing about this thing is called or what is said in these memories that exists, and that's probably why I can access them. Is because there's no words associated with them, and I mean, before you can understand a word, remembering a word in the context of words later it just doesn't seem that possible, or at least it would not be common. And so if there's words in being spoken in a memory, you probably restrict your ability to access it in the future. And the question is when you start speaking a language, are you a different person? And I would say no, but it is tough to talk about it out without linguistically framing it intrinsically almost as two different people, which is why in the show they say my innie and my outie. It's like they have no overlap in their experience, but they do have, this, it's the same person, same genetics, same body, same health, same, senses. So, but they just have no memory of the outside while they're inside, and they have no memory of the inside when they're outside. And this is really just a fascinating thing that gets you to ask a lot of questions about things beyond just the show that we all go through, like learning to speak, like my daughter. And she said pies the other day. I did catch it on video. I don't know if I'm gonna show it here though. I'd have to like get it off my phone, and I don't want to do that right now. But maybe another time. But she said pies. I was like reading her the book Harold and the Purple Crayon, and in that book they make pies, and or Harold draws pies, and I was like, yeah, pies, like, I would eat all those pies. And she was just like, oh, pies. And now that thing has a label in her mind, which is used to like fetch the visual. If I say pie, you will have a visual in your mind of pies. You'll have a memory of eating pie. You'll have an understanding of what your favorite pies are. And, but it's all like fetched and searchable with the word pie, like written or spoken, whatever. And but how would I tell you? I mean, I guess I could show you a picture of a pie, and you could, but what would probably be the first thought in your mind would be the word pie. It wouldn't be like the last memory you had of eating pies. It would actually be probably the word pie would pop into your mind, and then you would have memories and stuff. And so, but it's interesting because it's like my daughter's going through a Severance event, where in the show they just walk into an elevator, and then they go up, and by the time they hit the top, their memories from work are gone, and their memories from outside of work are back. And same thing, when they go to work, they go back down the elevator, and same thing happens, but in reverse. And so how this is done in the show, which is actually increasingly relevant to our world, and also my work with sentient singularity theory, is through the implantation of a chip, and by a company called Lumen, which we'll get into the symbolism of that in a minute. But I do have a stream lined up about Neuralink, and that is that technology is very similar to what seems to be portrayed in the show. But it's interesting to think about, would you actually be able to use chips to compartmentalize memories? And I'm not sure if you would be able to do that. And the reason why is because, and this is where metaphysics comes into play, is people in neuroscience and everything, they want to understand, where are our memories stored? What are our memories, and where are they stored? Are they just chemical states in your physical brain that are in a specific part of your brain, and if you remove that part, then you remove the memories, and that's it? Or are they more than that? And the reality is that they are definitely more than that. And memory, like I said, is information, and information is context. And so our memories, or our experiences, and the results of our experiences, and the effects that our actions have, and our experiences, I guess, impact, they are stored in the metaphysical framework of causality of the cosmos. They are not gone when you remove a part of your brain. They are probably inaccessible depending on the part of the brain that you remove, but that doesn't mean that they're actually gone. They could potentially be restored if the context is correct. What's interesting is a lot of times and I struggle on this channel a lot to do this, is I'll try and remember something. Today I was trying to remember the name of a hospital in Los Angeles, and I was struggling with it, and but I did get it, but I had to think about, okay, there's this hospital, and then I had to think about why I knew the different hospitals, and how they're related to my work, how they're related to my personal experiences, the birth of my daughter. I had to build the context in order to remember the hospital. And if you are outside, if you don't build that context, and you are in a position where whatever the reason is, that is beyond, that reason will be beyond you. You won't understand it, at least while you're, alive. That in that certain position, you can't remember something, some name that you usually know, or sometimes know, or some memory that you had about some experience, but for some reason it's just you're drawing a blank, or you're having a mind fart. It's because the context of the universe, of the cosmos, and the sentient beings that compose it, and of you in that relationship, that structure, that assembly structure, are not entangled in a way that allows you to access the information. There's plenty of different reasons why you would not be able to do that. Some of them could have to do with you. Some of them could have to do with the state of the cosmos beyond you. But our memories are not stored in the brain. And so I'm not sure if this technology would actually work, but of compartmentalizing memory using technology. But if you did do it, you'd have to understand the structure of information, of meta information, essentially, fundamentally, and the structure of the cosmos that gives the ultimate context to that information, and the nature of the cosmos that gives also the fundamental context to that information. You have to understand all these things probably in order to make a chip that can actually do this. These chips or these Neuralink chips, basically. Though I know they're going to try and make blind people see later this year. That's like some like revelation stuff. But it's incredible, and it's also a little concerning, but it's also incredible, and it allows you to interact with technology. I've seen the series of interviews, this series on Lex Fridman's podcast with Elon Musk and the patient with the first Neuralink chip, and some of the neuroscientists and neurosurgeons that were involved. It's like 7 hours. It is worth watching, but I'm going to do a stream on it. And they talk about all the different things that this chip can do. Nobody, I don't think, once in the series talks about how you could use it to compartmentalize or erase or even store memories, but they do talk about how it can do all kinds of other things. I don't think that it will be able to be used the way that it is in Severance. But if it is, then you would have to take advantage of like understanding how the mind works, not the brain, the mind. You are a mind, you have a brain. That's the difference. And the mind is an information processing system that is self-contained and self-referential and self-contextualizing. And that is you'd have to like take advantage of that in order to like somehow use technology to compartmentalize memory. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not possible the way that it is in Severance. And what's another movie that's interesting that I always liked is Paycheck with what's that guy's name? I'm drawing a blank, but he was married to Jennifer Lopez. Oh my gosh, Paycheck. This is the movie, and it's very similar. Where basically, it's with Ben Affleck, and in this movie, he goes to work on a classified project about that basically is like a device that lets them look into the future, and he gets injected with this compound that marks memories in the brain, and then later on when he's done with the work, he's an engineer, he gets a shot and it basically erases all of the memories that were tagged and formed and stored while he was working on this project. So everything gets forgotten up until the point where he had first got the shot to tag his memories. And that is probably also not the way that it works, and not possible, because it's not a chemical thing, memory. It's related to chemical processes, and they are very important to your ability to access memories, but while you're alive. But when you die, you probably remember everything. You probably remember all the memories before you started speaking, and you might even remember being in the womb. And that, I mean, I've watched my daughter develop in the womb. I saw a video of her. I saw her face before she was born in 3D. These ultrasounds are pretty amazing. And I saw the things that she liked to do and the positions that she liked to be in and the actions that she liked to do. And those continued as soon as she was out of the womb. And now that she's starting to speak, there's something changing about her understanding of the world, and it's probably the main severance event. It's probably a bigger severance event in the continuity of your experience than birth is, which is fascinating. I mean, well, actually, I don't know, because the thing about being in the womb is you're in constant darkness. You probably can't see anything, but you can hear and you can feel, and but there is sight that's added, which is a major sense, and that is gonna probably have an impact on how you understand the world, but it's it's probably not as big of of a severance event as language development. And I don't, but like as I said, um, there, whether it's mechanical using a chip or it's chemical using a shot, I don't think that we could use these things on their own to compartmentalize memory. Uh, but it is just in the shows, the show and the movie, the show Severance and the movie Paycheck are just fascinating because even still, if the technology is probably impossible, um, because it just opens up all these other questions about who are you? You are at least in part the sum total of your experiences that you remember, but you're also the sum total of the experiences that you don't remember, and you are the sum total of the experiences of the people who who you came from, your parents and their parents and their parents and their parents, and all the atoms and molecules that make all of us up. So uh, there is more to this, but it's than memory. But memory, while we are acting in the world, like I said, is highly constraining and I guess guiding of who we are becoming. Not who we are, but who we are kind of becoming as an action as we maneuver. So let me check the I know there's a long, you know, I guess ramble. I don't think it's a ramble, but I don't know what to call it. But I'm going to check the chat. So Memento, that was I've seen part of it. I haven't seen it all. Everything is one. I am you and you are me and we are all together. I don't know if I am you and you are me, but I am you and I are within the same one. So that's a better way of putting it. I am not you, you are not me. So uh, conceptualization. What if you aren't? What if I am unimportant? You are definitely important. Um, Book astronaut, you are definitely important because the initial sentience that is existence itself, God, as I call that someone, then nature of that someone is oneness because the nature of existence is oneness because existence is all that exists. Anything that is non-existent doesn't exist. So the nature of existence is that it is all encompassing and one. And that means that in order to create distinctiveness um, or multiplicity, you, God has to swim against his upstream. He has to swim against the current of his own nature. He has to go against his own nature of oneness to manifest multiplicity within himself. That means it has to be intentional. It has to. You cannot swim upstream accidentally. You cannot float upstream accidentally. You only float downstream. You have to choose to swim upstream, go against the nature of the existent circumstance and of yourself in order to do that which is not being done. Will is the desire to do that which is not being done, and the, to create multiplicity from oneness. If oneness is the default, which it is, it's a logical inevitability for almost for multiple reasons. It means that every single partition of sentience was intentional by God. This I will say, I don't understand why he made ticks and mosquitoes, but even ticks and mosquitoes are important and they're here intentionally. Every sentient little tick, and I hate ticks, and I love almost all animals, but I just don't like ticks. And I don't like mosquitoes. I don't like to interact with them. They're fast. Sure, they can be fascinating, but I don't want to interact with them. Most people don't. Any blood-sucking parasite, I really do wonder why God made them. But at the same time, he did. and there's reasons beyond my understanding that justify doing that. So you are important. You're definitely important. It is inevitable. Um, have you read the bicameral mind? No. New season dropped. The new season has not dropped of Severance. In February, I think it comes back. Looking for a trial subscription. Yeah, definitely do that. Apple TV's content is amazing. It really is. Another show that I would recommend on Apple TV is Silo. We don't need to talk about it tonight, but it's very good. And these shows are way better than anything Netflix is putting out. And it just, if they were on Netflix, they would be the most popular shows in the world. The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind by Julian Janus. Never heard of that. Ben Affleck. Yes, Ben Affleck. That's the person I was trying to remember. You must be an INTP. I am an INTP, actually. Josiah, that's really impressive. Do you like source code? What is source code? Is that a show? I don't. I have not seen it. Do you like Northrop Frye and Marshall McCullahan? I don't know who they are, who those people are. But it's interesting that you mentioned Northrop, because Northrop Grumman, I met this guy who works there, and I was like, what do you work on? And he was like, I can't tell you. And they made a plane that I have a model of over there, but I'm not going to grab it. But it's called a YF-23. It is my favorite airplane. I'm kind of an aviation nerd a little bit. And it was the competitor to the F-22 Raptor when they were, it was a competitor to the prototype of the F-22 Raptor in the 90s for the next generation fighter jet. And it is awesome looking plane. You can look it up. But he couldn't tell me what he worked on. And if this was possible to do this, severance situation, basically, where you can compartmentalize the mind of somebody, the memories of someone while they're at work, like in Paycheck, or do, or even more so dramatically in Severance. I wonder how much like companies that work on classified material, classified projects like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman would be inclined to mandate that type of technology. I would say that it would not be. It's not helpful though to the inevitable goal if you're going to actually do something where you utilize a skill that you have, because the memories that you have are what help you develop the skills that you have. And so to make it so that you can't access any memories prior to coming into the office would basically destroy your competency in almost everything. And that is represented in the show Severance. They basically are like children, but they can speak. And that's just for the sake of, making the show watchable. But would you even be able to speak? I don't think so. And in Paycheck, it's a bit more useful because he still remembers everything prior to getting to work while he's at work. It's just he can't remember what he worked on after he's done with the project and leaves. But this would actually make you not that great of an engineer because you can't learn from the most, I guess, impactful and important and revolutionary projects that you've worked on. So you would not have no memory of how did I solve that problem, because you had your memory wiped. But it's not a very useful thing, actually. The more you think about it, but it still asks many interesting questions. Being and nothingness is underrated by Sartre. I don't know what that means. Sartre. I guess he was a French philosopher. being in nothingness is underrated. I don't know what you mean by that. I don't like when philosophers talk about nothingness, or when people try and philosophize on nothingness. It opens up a huge can of worms. It is an empty can. It's a huge empty can of not worms. If that makes any sense, it doesn't though. That's the thing. Is you can't philosophize on nothingness deeply. There is nothing to think about. So when people are like this is everything and nothing, it's kind of like you have to really contextualize what that means for it to matter. But the intuitive definitions that pop into most people's heads when they hear that, it will not make any sense. It's not a deep thought. It's a non-thought. It's a dead end. So good evening, Mister. Good evening, Marco. Well, we are that which is becoming aware of itself. We are that which is being aware of itself. That's a bit, but close. That was close. But that which is being aware of itself. We don't become aware of ourselves. We are aware of ourselves. We become aware of additional context that we are within, and that can lead to theophanies and epiphanies and things like that. But you're never not self-aware, and then you eventually become self-aware. There is no you without being aware of yourself, but you can become aware of additional contexts, and we'll go over that in a bit, because there are some objective contexts, at least two, I would say, that are objective, or hard lines in levels of awareness. At least the only two that I have been able to deduce in my work. We are everything is exactly as it should be. Yes, or I think a better way of putting it is everything will eventually be exactly as it should be. That's a better way of putting it. Because sentience is agency, and I am someone and you are someone. We are not the same someones. We are within the same someone, create sentient creation, which is in the same someone that is sentient existence, God. But we are not the same someone. And but in order for that to be, you have to have the ability to make choices that are different and not impacted by as directly, at least, dictated by someone else. So I can make a choice, and it's my choice to. It's what free will is. It's the will is the desire to do that which is not being done, or fundamentally, you could just say the desire to do, and or the desire to be. But it is within the context of creation, you could say the desire to do that which is not being done, and your free will is really just the ability to make choices. Not everything that we think is a choice that we make in our day is actually a choice. When you go and you open the fridge and you're like, what am I in the mood for? I'm feeling something. I'm craving something savory. Let's eat, that chicken. That is not a choice, actually. It appears to be a choice, but it's not. There has to be external context that is introduced, that is context beyond you, that allows you to make a choice. Otherwise, it's just instincts, really, and you're just an algorithm in operating, on this algorithm that you do have as part of you, but it's not the totality of you. You can override it in certain circumstances, but it's more about the context of the circumstances than it is about just your sheer willpower. It's It's about, you have to be able to see that there is a choice and that there's a reason to make a choice in order to make a choice. If you come to a fork in the road, as I've said many times on here, and you don't know which, and each path looks like it leads, off into the distance, and you don't see them leading to anywhere that is distinct from each other, just like off into the distance for both paths, you can't make a choice on which path to choose. You have to see that one leads to the mountains and one leads to the ocean, and you have to have a goal in order to make a choice as well. So that's another thing that you have to have as a personal goal. You cannot make choices without a goal. It is impossible. It's the motivating, contextual motivator of every choice, and it is also the contextually defines the outcome of the choice, of how you judge the choice. Is like, was that a good decision? Well, it depends on what your goal was. So if your goal is to go to the mountains and you took the path to the beach, then that was not a successful choice. So why would you make that choice though too at the same time if you saw that the path went to the beach? But if you didn't see that it went to the beach and it looked like it was going to the mountains, and the path to the mountains looked like it went to the beach, then we can say that you made a choice, and you can also judge the choice. But if it's apparent that it's leading to the beach, the one that leads to the beach is leading to the beach, and it's apparent that the one that leads to the mountains is leading to the mountains, then yeah, you can make a choice depending on your goal. But that goal also has to be kind of beyond your instincts. It can't just be, I am hungry. That's like it's a choice, but it's not really a choice. It's like you can put on it's like we have the ability to put on this autopilot, and it's just LLM basically, or dynamic algorithm, which is what we call narrow AI these days. And it just like lets you, you have a different one for all these different circumstances. Like, what do I eat? It's like, well, what am I craving? You're not making choices in that circumstance. But if you're like, I really like dove and chicken, and I don't know why I said dove, but some friend asked me if I wanted to go dove hunting recently, so I'm thinking about that. But I've never eaten dove, I don't think. But if you're like, I love meat, let's just say that, simplified things, but I also now really feel like it's objectively wrong to eat meat because they are sentient beings on the same level as me, and I shouldn't be eating sentient beings on the same level as me, then I wouldn't say that that depends on how you're thinking about it, but I'm just saying they are organisms as well. They are multicellular organisms as well. Or they are sentient multicellular organisms. That's what they are. And if you think that that's immoral, and maybe it is not it's not maybe morally ideal, but I don't know if it's immoral. I eat meat. But I could understand why people would make the choice not to. And I think that could make sense. That is a choice that you're making to go against your nature of, I love meat, but I'm choosing not to eat it because of moral reasons. I love bacon and ham and cheese sandwiches. Eventually, a few years ago, I stopped eating bacon and ham and cheese sandwiches because I don't think that it's what is right for me morally to do. And I still like the way it tastes, I'm sure, because I smell it and it still smells good. But I went against my nature. That's a choice. You can also be like, I know it's bad to do, but I'm going to do it. And that's also a choice. It's probably less of a choice or it's less definite of a choice because you're not just going against your own nature. You're recognizing your nature, and you're just kind of going with it. The thing is it might be a choice, but it might not be a choice, and you don't know. But you always know it's a choice when you choose to go against your nature. It has to be a conscious choice. And but this is highly your will, your goal is also very relevant to defining who you are beyond your memories. It's like, what is your goal? It's another thing that defines that your being. I don't know if it's super fundamental, like it's beyond creation, like prior to you manifesting into the world. Um, uh, is is that defining of who you are? I don't know. I'm not, in that position right now, but um, it it's probably not. It's probably that more so that you're defined by the goal of the beings that manifested you, or you are constrained by the goal and judged by the goal of the beings that manifested you. That you're the beings that you're within, and also the you know the beings that you came from. So your parents and also the sentient universe. Just like you judge your cells as metastatic and cancerous, or as healthy and functional based on the goals that you have for those cells. Like, I want my muscle cells to be able to, you know, flex, and I, want your neurons to connect with other neurons, uh, and not, you want your skin cells to protect you from viruses and bacteria, but not go, metastatic and cancerous. It's like these are you are defining of how your cells are judged, because your goal supersedes theirs because you're higher in the hierarchy. Um, they cannot exist without you, but you can exist without them. Not all of them, but some. You can cut, a piece of skin off of your body, and you've cut out those cells, and those cells are going to die now because they're no longer in the environment that is where they live, and but you will continue to live on. So they are dependent upon you. You are not dependent upon them individually. There is no singular cell that you are dependent upon, at least that makes up you now. But that's not the case of your cells. Every cell in your body is completely dependent upon you surviving, for them to survive. So, we everything is exactly as it. Do you think quantum computers will predict the future? It's interesting. There's a show that's also very good that I've done a stream on called, oh gosh, what is it called? Somebody say it in the chat, but it's with Zach Galifianakis, I think, and it's about that. It's about using quantum computers to predict the future and also see the past to some degree, or a past. And oh gosh, what is it called? I did a stream on it. Galifianakis quantum computer. Show. I think it was with Zach Galifianakis. Quantum computer show. It was Devs. That's it. Devs. That is a great show. I did a stream on it years ago, and I've been waiting for it to come back. I don't think it's ever coming back. I think that they canceled it. Let's see. I think it was with Zach Galifianakis. No, it's not, I guess. It's with Nick Offerman. That's who I'm thinking of. Yeah, Nick Offerman. The guy from Parks and Rec. But yeah, I don't think that they are coming back. It was fascinating. And it's about that. It's about a quantum computer that is able to predict futures and, I guess, I don't want to say perceive, but construct pasts, potential pasts, and potential futures, and perceive potential futures. So you can't see the future, but there is only the present. uh, and the present is constructed of the goals that lead us to our, our to the future, but also of the uh, the results and of our actions in our past actions. But the past is not happening anymore, and neither is the future. I don't believe that time travel like would be possible, or even perceiving the future or perceiving the past. Perceiving pasts might be possible with, I guess perceiving the past would potentially be possible, but in some way, or constructing a of the past, a, constructing the perception of the past might be possible in some way, because but the thing is the perception of the past is dependent upon the perceiver. So like if you weren't there to see it, then there is no perspective that, like, whose perspective are you going to perceive um, uh, the past from? There is none. But you could construct something potentially out of it, that is a representation of an event. But when it comes to the future, you could perceive potential futures based on the entanglement structure and states of existence in the current moment and the goals of everyone. But you can't actually perceive the actual future that has not happened yet. It's impossible. And I understand people say, well, you don't know that. Like, I don't know, no, I guess, but like, I think I know. And I've given it more thought than anybody else that I know. So um, it's not like it's a whim thought. Those thoughts they come from the context that is sentient singularity theory, which, if you are not familiar with my work, you can go to sentientsingularity.com and you can see more about it. But I will be doing a stream on going over it all again. But there's videos that I put out towards the beginning of this channel that talk about my work before it was even called that. But they've been relabeled, those videos, to include the term sentient singularity theory, but it wasn't even called that at the time. And but that you need a context in order to form a thought whether or not something is possible. So most people, the context is kind of what we experience now, or it's just what they've been told, which is not really understanding of a context. It's just, an assumption. So it is difficult to think about the possibility of perception of the future and the past, or travel to the future and the past, without a theory of everything that you would deeply, understand, to contextualize the constraints and degrees of freedom related to the perception and travel to the future and past. So it's not something that you can just think about without kind of a fundamental metaphysics theory, whether it's one that you learned that somebody else came up with, or whether or not it's your own. It kind of takes an all-encompassing effort to think about that kind of stuff, but at least in a relevant way. That doesn't mean you can't use intuition, but to think about it rigorously, it takes an all-encompassing effort, well beyond just that single question. And but same thing with memories, thinking about memories. And memory is a perception of the past. That's what it is. And perception of the future, we already do. I can drop this, I can let this go, and I perceive that this will fall into a certain spot based on my understanding of the context and of everything in my experiences that, help back up that the understanding or the assumption that I have given the context. But it's when you catch a ball, it's because you're perceiving the future. If somebody throws you a ball and you're playing catch and you catch that ball, it is because you are perceiving the future. You are perceiving the likely future that the ball will be right there. Will quantum computers allow for us to do this on a much more crazy level? Potentially, but it won't show you what actually will happen. It will show you what a bunch of possibilities given the contextual inputs, I guess. So even that show Devs, it's fascinating, and but there is some things about it that are not accurate, probably. Which are do you think quantum computers will? Okay, why did Sapolsky refute free will? I don't know. I'm not actually familiar with his work. I don't study that many other philosophers that are not currently alive and thinking in public about like mind. I do study, some people like Joscha Bach a bit. I don't read their papers that really. I've like glanced over a lot of papers written by Joscha Bach and Michael Levin and Chris Langan and um, uh, um, Carl Friston and a bunch of other people. But I don't actually study the philosophy of that many past philosophers, or even the work of current philosophers in that rigorous of a way. I watch videos and interviews of them, but I don't usually rigorously read their papers. Partially that's an intentional thing because I didn't want to. Your mind is constantly, your brain, your algorithm that is also that you have, that you can switch on, or that switches on sometimes and kind of is usually on actually. Its job is to try and take a shortcut and automate things. So Joscha Bach says, AI today is just an automation endeavor, essentially. Our current AI projects that are not philosophical are just automation endeavors, and he's right. And we have that built into us. We have kind of like a machine learning algorithm built into us, but we also have the ability to be aware of it and make choices and beyond it and things like that. But that that like that free when you're saying like whether or not you want to discuss whether or not free will exists or not, or refute free will or advocate for it, you have to very specifically define it, and again you have to place it within a broader context, which is why a lot of people who are atheists or anti-theists and materialists or physicalists, I guess. I'm not really the biggest fan of any of these terms other than anti-theist. I think is a very accurate term to describe some people, including myself for most of my life. But it's most of these terms are kind of can be misleading, but we kind of have a general idea of what they are. But when you're a materialist, atheist, physicalist, anti-theist, you just believe in kind of like, you don't place sentience as a fundamental context of existence and the process of existence. You believe it's emergent from processes that are already taking place naturally. Not, I don't even want to say naturally, taking place without the will of someone motivating it, essentially. But this is actually a very incoherent way of viewing the world. There's a reason why we in society today have this as a very prevalent view, and it was my view for a very long time. But the more you deeply think about it, the more nonsensical it becomes, and also more inconsistent it is with actually your experience. It's just we just kind of have adopted this odd thing where we assume that if we don't know of anyone beyond a certain scientific circumstance that is motivating an interaction or an action or a reaction, then we assume that they're not there because we don't see them. But that is nonsense. They couldn't see cells just a few hundred years ago, basically. Yeah, I don't know when they developed the microscope close enough that it was good enough to allow you to see cells, but good enough to allow you not just to see cells, but see your cells, to know you're made of cells. Like that, we're basically looking around and not seeing someone's, or not immediately identifying things as someone's, and we're assuming that there is no someone there. And but when you try and think about your personal experience and things moving in the world, you can't actually usually think of a circumstance in which some action is taking place that wasn't motivated by an actor. You can be like, well, I was speaking to my younger brother, and he knows my work. The back of the napkin condensed version of what my theory is. He doesn't believe it. I have multiple siblings, and he's one of them. And some of them have a better understanding of it than others. And he was like, no, I don't believe that, these are atoms are sentient beings, and, we're not inside of a sentient being. Like, and he basically insinuated he knows that we go around the sun, and like, that, the sun is this, and the moon is this, and we're on this, floating rock called Earth. I'm not saying that none of that's true. I'm just saying there's context beyond that. And he was just like, I know that. And I was like, do you know that? Have you ever been outside Earth, beyond Earth, off Earth? No, you're taking people's word for it. And this is this leads to nonsensical thoughts, dead end thoughts, uncontextualized thoughts, or miscontextualized thoughts, not uncontextualized thoughts. You can't have an uncontextualized thought, because that's the equivalent of having information outside of context completely. But there is no information outside of context. It's just that you're miscontextualizing and some bit of information, and it's misinforming you because of that. So I believe that agency and free will is an assumption. It might be illusory. What does that even mean? That's what I want to know. Like, I'm not trying to argue with you or call you out in any cantankerous way. I'm just like, what does it mean for free will to be illusory? Like, I don't know. I don't think that you can say that without defining free will very specifically first. Like, what is free will? The question is, do you have the ability to make a choice to pursue a specific goal that sometimes would go against your nature? We'll add additional context that really makes it clear that it goes against your instincts. I would say to some degree, yes, you do. At least your biological instincts. Maybe there's metaphysical instincts that, if you want to call those instincts, that's different. But like your biological instincts, I don't think that you can make a choice to. I think you can definitely make a choice to go against them in certain circumstances. But you have to see that there is a choice to be made, and that there's a reason to make the choice, which means like you have to have a goal involved to some degree to make that choice too. So there's a lot of things involved with that. But if you don't have a goal to do something beyond your instincts, and you don't have a metaphysical framework that would insinuate or would kind of require or that there is, or propose that there is goals beyond you, that your goals that matter more than your goals, then there's so many, not so many, but there are multiple things. It's a finite amount, but there are multiple things that you require in order to be able to make a choice and actually perceive that you have a choice, and perceive why you would want to make a choice. Like, there's a lot of things involved in free will, but free will is the ability to make a choice. That is not biologically instinctual. Today, I moved the trash cans back into our yard, and because the trash guy came and picked it up, and I was moving it, a huge bullfrog, or I think it was might have been a leopard frog, but it was a leopard frog or a bullfrog, jumped out from where I was pushing the trash can right at me. I freaked out and like leapt back and like yelled, and right as our neighbors were walking by, and they just looked at me like, "What the heck is going on?" And I turned to them. I'm like, "Sorry, it was a frog." They just laughed at me, and I'm like, I have a background in zoology, but frogs jumping at you when you don't know that they're there and they just all of a sudden jump out of the grass is such an odd thing, and you have no choice, but your mind goes on autopilot and is like, especially if your mind doesn't put two and two together and say, this is a frog, it is not dangerous. And I'm from Arizona. We don't have like giant frogs very often jumping, multiple feet into the air. They do exist, but like they're at ponds, they're not in your grass. And so it motivated it triggered like an instinctual just like yell and jump backwards. It's like I didn't make the choice to jump backwards and yell. Um, but so that's not everything we do is a choice, but there are things that we can do to that are choices. Sometimes I find a spider in the house, and I don't like love spiders, but I like some spiders actually a lot. Some spiders are amazing, but I try, if it's not a dangerous spider, I try to like capture it and put it outside. Every time I find a jumping spider in the house, which I do like jumping spiders, I will catch it and put it outside instead of stepping on it, or and that is, I don't know if it was always a choice. I don't know if it is now a choice so much. It's kind of just like, I mean, I guess it is a choice because it's usually inconvenient, but it's not like my nature is I just want to squish it at this point in my life. But for some people it is. They're afraid of these things, and they still are like, I recognize that this is a sentient being and I don't want to kill it because it's inconvenient to me. But sometimes I have killed a spider just because I was too lazy to bring it outside. Not gonna lie, and I always feel horrible every time I do that. And not like it's not like it weighs on me at night, but it does make me think for a few minutes afterwards just how cruel it is to just kill something out of inconvenience, and kill someone out of inconvenience, not just something. And so there, I don't know. I would say that we all have the personal experience of choice, and that's the thing about that term illusory. It's like it looks like we all have the ability to have freedom to guide or to change our will, I guess, I guess to go against our will, maybe you could say, to choose, make choices against our will, or towards our will, and against our instincts, or even towards our instincts. If you're aware of a reason why you wouldn't want to follow your instincts, and you're aware, it makes you aware of the choice to follow them or not, and then we sit there and we just go, it might be illusory. Why? What evidence do you have that your entire experience is firsthand experience, which is the information that you should trust the most, is just that of a chooser, or someone who has the ability to make choice, someone with goals and the ability to make choices. That is free will. There is no free will. Will is the desire to do that which is not being done, or you could just say the desire to do. And freedom of will is the ability to choose, make choices, and related to the desire to do that which is not being done, or the desire to do. And what in our world would make you think that you should just completely write off your own experience? That's a nonsensical, it's an insane way of looking at the world. I'm not saying that to be, I don't mean that as like to attack you or anybody else who thinks that. I thought that too for the majority of my life. I'm using it technically. Like, think about it, that. And the thing is that, and here's another reason why this is so tough, is our entire educational experience, or a lot of it, is based on miscontextualizing learning, and it is that we're taught to prioritize secondhand information above firsthand information. Everybody that argues against flat earthers, and by the way, at least not everybody, but most people who say flat earthers are crazy, and I'm not saying that flat earthers are right. Honestly, space-time is not fundamental, so shape, like flatness and curvedness, is not fundamental either. It might be that the Earth appears flat while you're within it, and when you're outside it, whatever that kind of means, I don't even know if we understand exactly what that means. It appears to be not to be a spherical, to be singular or self-contained singular structure. That it will inevitably come from the constraints of our own mind. So there's no way to know whether or not. I don't even want to say that. It's that more so than whether or not it is objectively like that. It is more important that it is that your mind is going to perceive it like that, and that is what constructs physical reality is our mind, and the mind that we're within. That the thoughts of the mind we're within are concretized to us because we can't override them. They're higher in the hierarchy. So, you can think about that. Like I said, you are a mind. You're not a brain. You are a mind. You decide, make a choice to decide to go pick up this water bottle. Every cell in your body now has to contend with the fact that the world has physical constraints that are dictating relationships and things like that are going on, and the environmental experience of all your cells as you make a movement. And so that is a thought, essentially. It's an action, but it's a thought too. It's both, and the actions and thoughts of you override the actions and thoughts of the beings within you. They form the physically observed constraints of their world. They exist in you. They have no concept of what is outside of you, except certain cells in your body do. But even then, it's pretty entangled for them. So there's just nothing in our firsthand experience that would make us want to just assume that something is illusory. That just means fake. That's all it means. And but our education has taught us, or conditioned us, as a better way of putting it, not taught us, conditioned us to prioritize secondhand information, like, oh, don't you know the world is a sphere? Or Earth is a sphere, don't you know? You're crazy if you think it's flat. Everything in your experience, unless you are an astronaut, indicates that it's flat. I'm not saying that if you leave Earth, it's not perceived as a sphere. I do believe that it is. And there are things about, like, you can track the stars and stuff like that do indicate a spherical structure. But the point is that, like, maneuvering the ground it appears flat to all of us. And especially in your active experience, your local experience. And yet we just assume that people who don't prioritize that are crazy. That's wrong. I'm not, like, I don't believe that our physical, that the shapes that we physically perceive exist beyond the context and relationships of us in being a mind within a mind, and also being composed of minds, but also I don't believe that they exist outside the context of the information structure that is you as a mind, organizing that information by differentiating it and categorizing it, putting it into a hierarchy, etc. So I don't believe in shape being fundamental. So I'm not a flat earther, but I'm not a sphere earther. Your mind is dictating how you see everything around you, including how you understand everything around you, including colors and the relationships between those colors. You're really perceiving information in your own mind in a certain context that makes it specific looking, and we call it color, or you could call it shapes. It's the same thing as sphere. You've got the Platonic solids, and then you have the primary and secondary colors. It's the same exact thing is happening. The information organization process that is creating the perception of the Platonic solids plus a sphere, which brings you to 6. I think there's 5 Platonic solids plus sphere, which is 6, and then primary and secondary colors, which is 6 as well. And so, and also igneous and sedimentary rocks, and there's 6 of those. And you usually learn about 3 in school, but there's actually dualistic aspect to that as well. And your senses, look at your hand. You think that this hand exists in the shape that it does beyond your perception, and it does not. You can start to see the fractal pattern of this everywhere you look if you kind of understand what to look for. But you'll see this if you're going to think about limbs. Think about my limbs. I have arms, hands, fingers, legs, feet, toes. Same thing, the information processing system and process and structure, that it's a structure / process. A mind is a structure / process. It is being. It's an active, dynamic structure. So that's why I say it always, say process and structure, or like action and, I don't know, structure, something like that, thing and being. But it's that you can see that same structure everywhere. You can look at your senses and be like, sight and smell and hearing. These are all senses that are specifically for perceiving that which you perceive as separate from you. And then you have touch and taste and emotion, which is the 6th sense. That is, you do have a 6th sense. It's just emotion, or you could call it intuition, but it's the same thing. Intuition is just the triggering, the perception of emotion due to metaphysical processes that are beyond your immediate your obvious perception. You can feel the universe moving because you are the universe. So sometimes you can feel things like that. And but that's just your 6th sense. It's not like it's not psychic in any unique way, but it is it's fundamental because it's like internal more so. It's for perceiving your own context in. It's like the context of your selfness, not of your body, but of your selfness, of your someoneness in a certain situation is what dictates how you feel about it. So like if somebody dies and it's somebody I don't know, they were somebody who was a terrible person and abused children and murdered people or stole, I don't know, like you're not going to feel as bad most likely as you would if it's like your brother or friend or spouse. It's like that your senses, that sight, smell, and hearing are for perceiving and orienting in relationship with structures that you perceive as separate from you, and your sense of taste and touch, and also your emotions are for perceiving things that you perceive as touching you, but your sense of emotion is beyond It's like super touching you. That's why you say that song touched me, or that painting moved me. It's like it's the verbiage that makes sense because it's impacting you actually. Whereas like if you taste something, it's impacting you, like literally, I guess, or physically, and same thing with your sense of touch, but also your sense of emotion. But there's a hierarchy to these as well. So there is a bifurcation. You know, hands are for manipulating the world, legs are for maneuvering the world. Usually, you know, you can grab things with your toes and stuff, whatever. But and your sight, smell, hearing, sensing things that are not impacting you directly, but emotion and touch and taste are for perceiving things that do impact you directly. And this is the same pattern everywhere, and it's coming from your mind. So it is insane. The original point, it is insane, technically insane, not like judgmentally insane. Or it is technically nonsensical to prioritize secondhand information above firsthand information. Why would you assume that something that you perceive is just illusory? Not even just something you perceive, something that is your perception itself, you know, your sense of self. How is that an illusion? That means you don't exist. Sam Harris talks about this, and I've done streams on it. And it's like he argues his own self away. Why? There's no reason for that, other than if you're prioritizing secondhand information above firsthand information. Okay, let's see this. Sorry I went on a tangent there, a rant, but it's very important actually. It is not just very important; it's essential. You cannot make sense of the world if you're going to prioritize secondhand information above firsthand information. Agency and free will is an assumption. It's not an assumption. It's an experience. Agency and free will are experience. There's nothing that is perceived beyond them. Emergent. Okay, wait, hold on. I don't know what you meant by emergent. Is writing dead thought? Not necessarily, but it's like a snapshot. Greetings all. What's up, real enigmas? Have you watched the TV show From? No, I have not. Peekaboo. Coherent synchronicity. I don't know what you are specifically referring to. Prehistoric individuals experienced auditory hallucinations as commands from God, guiding their actions. You don't know how they perceived those experiences that they claim were interactions with God. I have had interactions with God. They were not, I wouldn't call them auditory, like they've been feelings, you know, like once I read something and in scripture, and I realized that it was like describing something that I do, and it was like a super self-reflective moment, and I just started laughing hysterically to myself, like by myself. Normally, you don't laugh out loud when you're by yourself. It's kind of like a thing that gets externalized when it's being shared with someone external to you, like somebody else, when you're around other people. That's why laughter is contagious, but usually when you're by yourself, like it's not as funny to watch a comedy sketch completely by yourself versus if you're in a room with a bunch of people live, then it's going to be way funnier. So at least you're going to laugh more out loud. But I laughed out loud, and I was like, I felt like I was laughing with God, essentially. He was laughing at the fact that I realized like this, but it wasn't auditory. It was just feeling. And I think when we say like people in the past heard like voices and then just assumed it was God talking to them. I think that the picture that we're creating in our head is one that seems crazy, but it also isn't probably accurate to what the experience was actually like for those people. We shouldn't assume that we understand what that experience was like based on reading many times over translated text about someone 3,000 years ago. Like, you shouldn't assume that, no, what is said there is crazy, so he's crazy. There's a reason why his words have continued on in a text that has, majority of the world would describe as very useful and relevant to life. And it's not because he was a crazy person and just got lucky. That doesn't happen. I think, name another instance in which that happens. That's much closer to home. I would be surprised if you could. Jumping spiders live rent-free in my house. Yep, they live rent-free in my garden. I try and let them outside because I'm afraid they're not going to get enough food if they're in here. Let's see. Black widows are willfully squished. Hope they forgive me. Yeah, no, I kill black widows too. Only information gathered would prompt one to go against their instinct, but you don't choose what information you access, nor your ability to possess it. That's true for the most part. But you can still make a choice to, when you do have new information, especially if it goes against your biological instincts, to go against your biological instincts sometimes, or at least to have the goal of going against your biological instincts. I mean, there's lots of things that are like this. Marriage is like this. Marriage, I mean, I advocate for marriage on this channel all the time, and I probably, we'll start talking about it again because we haven't talked about it too much in a while, but I have streams on it. I live streamed my wedding on here, and my wife and I got on and talked about marriage multiple times after words. And I haven't been married, for a lifetime or anything like that, but I'm sharing what I'm learning, and definitely marriage is society. There is no society without marriage. It will fall apart. It's not just a talking point. The more you understand that, the more important you realize it is. And also, the more you think about life and the goal of life and the goals of life, the more marriage makes sense. But it's always against your instinct, especially as a man. And so it's a choice. Like, that was one of the instances in my life that really helped me understand free will, was getting married, because you have to choose to go against your instincts. And, your instincts are motivating you to, especially as a man, there's always some, other pretty, girl out there, and that you would want, physically at least. And you have to make the choice to be like, no, I'm committing to this one. And it is against my instincts entirely. But I believe that it is objectively beyond me, due to the contexts beyond me, the hierarchical and relational and logical contexts and constraints beyond me. I believe that it is the moral and good and kind of essential thing to do, at least for some people. It doesn't mean it's the moral essential for everybody, but it is a moral essential that people get married, that most people get married, or else you will have society fall apart. And if society falls apart, it destroys the whole chain of sentient sentient evolution. Like, there are levels beyond the individual person, levels of sentience beyond the individual person, that are relying upon us to create order on our level. Just like if all your cells were like, screw it, I'm gonna just replicate, endlessly and do my own thing. I'm not gonna do my job anymore. I'm not gonna, work with so and so anymore. I'm just gonna do my own thing. Every cell in your body would go cancerous and you would die. Like, there are levels of sentience that are relying upon us, um, relying on the level below them or preceding them to have majority order. There will always be some chaos, but like the majority order. And so like it's but it is still against your nature as a man, especially. Maybe not so much as a woman, but as a man, it is definitely against your nature. And maybe as a woman, in the context of our current society, actually, is like monogamous lifelong marriage is probably against their nature in the context of our technological society. But yeah, it is like you have the ability to make choices. If you don't believe that, then I don't think, then it's almost like it becomes true for you. You just think your way out of agency. You know, people say, "Oh, you sold so and so sold their soul." What does that mean? It means like to give up your own agency for the sake of just because you prioritized something that wasn't fundamentally meaningful as the highest value. And so money. It's like money isn't valuable in and of itself. It's like a tool, you know. Fame is not valuable in and of itself. It's just it's a tool, really. It's like a social tool, and or it's a social state, but it isn't intrinsically valuable. It can be valuable, it can be used to serve things that are fundamentally valuable, but it is not intrinsically valuable. And so this is when you prioritize things that are not fundamentally valuable over things that are fundamentally valuable, then which is really you're prioritizing something in your life above someone in your life. When you do that, you will almost destroy your own agency because you're allowing all outside forces to dictate what you do. And because you've given up your own goal you've given up a fundamental goal, at least, which is, you know, involves being meaningful to other beings, because sentience is fundamental. So if you give that up, then you're just cutting yourself off. That's what idol worship is too. It's like but it's even more than that. It's like that plus like you're also not you're choosing to serve. Even you could idol worship someone and it would be like, even if it's your like spouse or your parent or your child even, or your boss, whatever, or just some rock star. It's like but the thing is if you don't know them personally, it's not a someone to you. Like if it's just some rock star and you're like, I'm gonna do anything that, I don't know rock star names, guys. I'm terrible with names. But Michael Jackson says I should do, I'm gonna do that. And whatever Michael Jackson does, I'm gonna do. It's like he's not the one who ends up judging you in the end, and he can't, because he's not beyond you in a fundamental moral hierarchy. So so you cannot idol worship another someone, but at the same time, when you do that, you're almost like if it's like a rock star, you're treating them as a something, not a someone. You don't know them. But if it's like your kids, I remember when I was a kid, I heard religious people say, most important person is God, next most important person is your spouse, and then your kids. And I was like, that's crazy. Obviously, your God doesn't exist. Your kids are the most important thing because they live on beyond you, and your spouse then comes next. It's like your spouse is the second most important person. God isn't important because he's not a person and doesn't exist, and your kids are the most important because they are your legacy essentially. That's actually all false. You need to prioritize your spouse because that's above any other human being, because you're forming a singular entity with that person, and you are united in goals and reliant upon each other for the rest of your life if you stay together, God willing, you willing, your spouse willing, all three of you willing, and uh, but your your kids are like, they are not the one who you is your partner in life. They are your part of your legacy, but they are not your partner. And but I do, now that I have a kid, understand why it is natural. It is your instincts to want to prioritize your kids. You just adore them. And I mean, I adore my spouse too, but I love my spouse, but it's different. I do adore my spouse, but it's different. I chose my spouse. I didn't choose my kid, but you have this whole instinct thing going on with your kid that they're just cute. But at the same time, when you first meet your spouse, you usually think that they're very attractive sexually, and that's like adoration um, of your spouse. But once you're married, it's different. It just becomes different. You still find them attractive, hopefully, but like it's just at that point, it's the context is different because it's a choice. It's not just the context is I'm attracted. The context is I chose, no matter what. So it's different in how you perceive it at that point. But yeah. Um, uh, Seems like this. I accidentally suppressed my sympathetic yawn somehow. It. I accidentally suppressed my sympathetic yawn somehow. That's good. Um, uh, I don't know what that was exactly relevant towards, but let me know in the chat if it was important. Yeah, it seems like the scripts we acquire through culture and society are meant to divorce an individual from their agency. It is 100% that is the case. There are institutions and individuals who do absolutely want to divorce you from your agency for the sake of turning you into a tool that is useful to accomplishing their goals. And institutions don't have goals, but individuals in those institutions do have goals. And those institutions are tools to divorce you from your own agency. That's absolutely true. Mental agency, the ability to command one's experience. Yes, or the ability to to navigate one's experience. Maybe not command it, but to navigate it. Mentally, all paths converging towards the vertex seem to compete. That's true, but they also don't. But because they're all different paths, but they don't actually compete. It's a perception that's false because we're thinking about it spatially, but they actually don't. If a line of causality has no diameter to it, it's just a line, then it will never it will never compete with other lines. They just converge. Have you seen those forget Allah, and so he makes them to forget themselves? That's a brilliant quote. All smart atheists will deny their own existence eventually. It blows my mind. Yeah, it's I did that too. I'm not like judging. It comes from us being kind of conditioned, and also we do perceive like certain things in our immediate experience that indicate that what we're being told in school is accurate, and a lot of it is, but then we just assume all of it is because of that, and that's like due to conditioning a lot of times. And it's also because school limits your ability to learn how to think because it restricts you to a desk. That's probably the worst part about it, is not that it teaches you things that are false, is that it prevents you from learning how to learn what is true. And you learn from experience, and school in most instances is not is you are not allowed to have personal experiences. You're just required to memorize that which other people said. Isaiah 45:7. I don't know. Fear of man is folly, for God controls the ways of men. Yeah, it's like in the Bible it says wisdom begins with fear of God, like reverence for God. People argue whether or not you should say fear or reverence or respect. It's not just respect. It's like revere. But also, it's like how you view your dad as a kid, hopefully, which is like, he can control you if he won't. He can. Your life is in his hands to some degree, and he could end you, but he's also there to protect you, and you need to see that double side of it. But the thing about is a reason why I think wisdom begins with not just fear, it's like reverence, is because to love God, it also begins with the love of God, I would say, which is like the consideration of God's goals and feelings and prioritization of them above your own. And then also on the flip side of that, which is usually motivating towards the same thing, whatever it is the fear of the consequence that he can inflict on you for certain things. And I don't even mean that by punishment, just for punishment's sake. It's like some of these things God can't allow. If he did, it would sabotage his greater goal. And so why would he do that? It's not that he couldn't allow it. It's that he couldn't allow it and also achieve his greater goal. So why would he? At least allow everyone all the time, which is to just do what we wanted. That doesn't mean that you're not allowed to do what you want. You are. We have agency. Agency is a requirement for meaning. God, if we were all just machines and that could be programmed by that were just controlled by someone else entirely, then there would be no meaning. There'd be no one else to impact. And because sentience is fundamental, then sentience is fundamentally all that matters. And that means that your impact on sentience is really all that matters. And the way that you impact sentience, maximize your impact on sentience, is to impact sentient beings beyond yourself, because you're always impacting yourself intrinsically. So, but to impact sentient beings beyond yourself. This is why everybody has this internal drive to like desire to make a difference. And sometimes people will choose with their own free will to override that, and they will prioritize fame or money over that kind of thing. The desire to impact some other people positively is like, I just want money. That doesn't mean their other desire is gone, but they've given up the part of them that allows them to be a fundamental agent, because they've given up something that's fundamentally meaningful, something that fundamentally matters, something that is real and impactful more so than just whatever it is that you're prioritizing instead. Krishna says he is everything, controlling all events in Gita. I mean, God does control all events, but he can control all events. That doesn't mean he doesn't allow us to also control certain events. He definitely does. But that's him. That is within his control. Like, he is allowing us to be and make choices in certain contexts. And sometimes he does not probably allow us to make a certain choice that we would want to make. He won't allow it. Maybe the context of that is kind of complicated and maybe pretty specific. But if something, God's will be done because he will make sure that that is the case. Just like, if you could monitor all your cells at once, you could make sure that you're not going to die of cancer. Because any cell, as soon as it decided to step out of line, it was going to or it went too far and it got spread too much, then you could just end it, cut it out. It's our lack of recognition of when that's happening that allows for people to die of cancer. But if you had the perception of everyone within you all the time, like God does, it's different because you can cut that the problem. You can end the problem shortly after it starts, or soon enough after it starts, before it is able to actually disrupt your greater goal. Hey guys, what's up? What's up, memes? We are all slaves of God. We're not slaves. As so long as we don't control the law of nature, our instincts are only difference is consciousness of the fact. You are different in your internally consistent and self-contained information structure that is your experience, that allows you to experience your you-ness. This is, for those of you who don't follow my work, regularly. This is what every sentient being perceives: 4 primary perspectives: inside, outside, separate, and oneness is the foundation of my work, and they are all self-defining. So it's self-contained because it's entirely self-referential, but it's also there's differentiation in a relationship structure that allows for orientation to take place outside of a relativistic context. So it doesn't mean it's like this is more important. This allows you to orient in structures that it's not just bigger than, smaller than, faster than, slower than, brighter than, darker than. It's like I am inside of myself. I am outside of you. I am one with myself. I'm separate from you. Inside means separate and oneness. Outside means separate from oneness. And then separate would be inside or outside of oneness, and oneness would be outside and inside of separateness. So they're all co-defining. So they are immediately perceived. You immediately perceive all of them as soon as you perceive one of them. If I say that's separate from that, it's like, okay, well, or if I say the water is inside the cup, it's like you are now differentiating. The water is separate from the cup. It is inside the cup, which, separate and oneness fundamentally, inside means separate and one. So if you said, here, hand me that cup, it's like I give you the cup with the water in it. You don't pick up the cup, dump the water out, and then hand me the cup usually. And that's not how we perceive the goal usually. And also, if you pick it up, the water doesn't fall out. It's within it. And also, like a fetus inside of a mother, it's like it's separate and one with the mother. It's not separate or one. It's separate and one because it's inside. And so what this means is like, well, these are all self-co-defining and dependent, and immediate, or not immediate, but like, what's the term? Be like instantaneously perceived, because as soon as you perceive any perception, you perceive all 4 of these perceptions. It's how you orient your you-ness in a world that you perceive as distinct from you, or how you conceive of that which is distinct from you as well. Like if you're God and there's no one else and there's nothing else besides you, but yet, and you're like, I'm going to create difference within myself, then you have to immediately perceive all of these even if you're saying I in your God and you're like, there is nothing outside of me, that is the conceptualization of what it would mean to be outside, because you are able to conceive of the fact and deduce the fact that there is nothing outside of you. So it's um, these are four simultaneously perceived structures, or perceptions. And what's interesting about this too is, I mean, this lines up with every orientative tool that we have, like a compass, north, south, east, and west, up, down, left, and right. These are like how we orient firsthand, is like up, down, left, and right. When I say look up, you don't look up and think like up from someone else's point of view. It's up is up from your point of view. Right and left are from your point of view. You know, if you're looking at me and I'm looking at you, my right, if I point to the right, it's gonna point to where you're gonna, in a direction that's like, let's say that's west or it's east. I point to the right and it's east. You would have to point to the left for it to be east. So these are the two different, you know, models that we use to navigate. One of them is third person, which is north, south, east, and west, and one of them is first person, which is up, down, left, and right. But it's really, one of them is a perception from the inside looking out, which is left, right, up, and down, and the other one is kind of the perception from the outside in, which is north, south, east, and west, because you're thinking about the boundaries of the space that you're maneuvering. So you're kind of conceiving of having a God's eye view, like looking at the space that you're maneuvering from the outside. And that's exactly two of the four primary perspectives, is inside and outside. You know, north and south are separate from you. Left and right are that's north and south are separate from you. Right and left are one with you. There is no right and left without you. But there is a north and south. But it's kind of like there's a bunch of people that are agreeing on what is north and south. So it's just interesting. I hope that makes some sense. But what's also kind of odd is, there's four temperaments in this four primary perspectives, is reason why we see four forces in physics and plenty, you know, addition and subtraction and multiplication and division, and many other instances of four. Four chord songs are seen as complete. Four, even mathematically, is just fascinating because it's the only number, I believe, in which a number times itself and a number plus itself is the same number, and it all will equal the same thing. 2 plus 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 divided by 2, yeah, I think, let's see if it goes back the other way. I can't remember. I did think about it the other day, but I forgot what I realized. But it's 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 4 minus 2 is 2. So it's the same exact thing. It goes back the other way as well. And I don't think there's another number that is the case, which means like it is like metamathematically perfectly balanced, other than just 1. If you're going to say 1 is perfectly balanced, sure. But if you're going to think about multiplicity, 4 is the only other number that's like perfectly balanced, you could say. Maybe 9 in a weird way too. It's another square number. I don't know if it's perfectly balanced, but 4 is perfectly balanced and complete. We've talked about this before, of like why cars, you add an extra wheel or 2 or 3 or 4, you know, to a car after 4, and it doesn't increase its stability. But you add a wheel beyond 1 to a motor vehicle, and you will increase stability until you hit 4, and then you will have like no added stability after that, or at least it's diminishing returns. But so it's doing this, or it's doing this, but no matter what, there's like a vertex there of like maximum stability. And but in this show, Severance, there was 4 tempers that the guy who's the CEO, like founder of the company, said there were 4 tempers, but like tempers, like not temperaments, but tempers, like bad, destructive emotions, I guess. Woe, frolic, dread, and malice. I don't know if that is outside of the show. Um, woe, frolic, dread, malice. The 4 tempers, Severance wiki. Oh yeah, this is just from Severance. It's like brilliant. Things that get adopted by society and become part of, kind of like appreciated by a lot of people. Like Severance, like a good show or something. You'll always see that there's a fundamental pattern to it that is followed. Same thing with, like, look at Star Wars and Harry Potter. It's like same thing. It's like the chosen one has to, you know, it's the same story. It's like the chosen one who's the orphan. It's the same exact story as Moses. Moses lost his family, gets a new family, essentially, is chosen to, accomplish a greater goal for good. Um, there's really only one story that makes coherent sense to us, because it's the story that follows cause like the natural process of causality, I guess, and perception. But it's very interesting. Um, who asked Holly? Guys, John and Noah. I don't know what you mean. Who asked Holly? Oh, what do you mean memes? I'm lost. Subjective versus objective are based on the laws of nature. Or are you saying laws of nature can be subjective? I'm saying the laws of nature are super subjective. Objective is not even the best term for it. But the law, like, what do you mean they are objective or they are subjective? I would say they're subjective to God because they are subject to God and his constraints too, not just his choices, but also his own individual constraints. God has limits, but he is the definer of his own limits. His oneness is a limit that he has. He cannot escape his oneness. He cannot create someone outside of him. And like, I guess you could say superphysically, like, it has to be within anyone who exists or anything that exists is within existence, and God is sentient existence. So God is more constrained than us in many ways. But because he's higher than us in the hierarchy, because we are all within him, then it still means he's the boss, even if he is super constrained. But all constraints are also degrees of freedom. The walls that form the hallway that you walk down, that constrain you and keep you from walking anywhere else outside the hallway, are also that which allows you to perceive and walk down the hallway in the first place, because they frame and structure the hallway. There is no hallway to walk down without walls that constrain you in. So constraints and degrees of freedom are dependent fundamentally. They're not mutually exclusive like we think like we perceive many constraints and freedoms within creation, I guess, or within subjectivity, within fundamentality, or like universality. Same thing. Is universality and fundamentality are kind of like the same thing, or similar enough for the sake of this explanation. That in universality and fundamentality, constraints are degrees of freedom. Constraints frame our and create our degrees of freedom, if that makes sense. But basically, Keir Egan, who's like the guy who created Lumen in the show, he has these four tempers: woe, frolic, dread, and malice. Woe is, I don't know how like good these really are, but they seem decent enough. Woe is great sorrow or distress. Dread is anticipation of, negativity. Um, Malice is mean, essentially, and frolic is like silliness in a negative sense. It's like the negative side of silliness. It's like not taking things seriously. Um, but here, let me see. Um, so, but it's interesting because we think about the show though. Also, another thing I want to like bring it back to the show a bit before we wrap up. In the show, you think about being in the perspective of somebody who's it just has this never-ending workday, and uh, and how they don't experience sleep. So like they just have this perception and an experience of like getting in the elevator and to leave, and then being in the elevator after they've arrived and back to work. But they feel the physical effects of getting sleep and being rested, but they don't actually have the experience of differentiating their day. And uh, and this kind of like compartmentalization of our time is something that is very important to, I guess, our conceptualization of our own life. And I've been dealing with this actually personally lately as I moved, 3 months ago. I've talked about it on here, and I'm now working fully remotely, and I don't have like very clear lines between like this is work time, this is not work time. Like as much as it was, I've always worked partially remotely for the company for the job that I have now, but not entirely. And but I have to intentionally draw those lines because there isn't really a physical differentiation. And what it's done is it's made me feel like I have like way less time. Which that's not really, I mean, time is actually, there's time as far as like what we think of as time, which is like a year, which is just defined by the Earth going around the sun, or all four, or us experiencing all four seasons. That four seasons, four primary perspectives, that is actually timing. It's not really time. I mean, it is. We can call it time, but like you could call it time, or you could say that is timing. It's us timing things. On January 31st, I'm gonna do this and meet you. We can meet at the coffee shop, and it's like we are using these actions that we can perceive to within the cosmos to like time, and within our own lives, like going to sleep and waking up, the sun rising and setting. This allows us to kind of what's a term when you like granulate, but not granulate. What's the physics term that people use? They say not pixelate or granulate, but there's a term for it when it's not quantized. It's like to oh man, to memes, help me out here in the chat. Like the Planck length is the ultimate. It's like the ultimate pixelization, or quantization, or granulation. It's like something else. Atomize. It's like atomize. That's probably a good one. But there's another word I'm looking for, but that works too. All these words kind of work, but there is one that's better that I can't remember right now for some reason. But it's that allows us to like perceive time, and so perceive timing, which is actually like our perception of time, like the arrow of time, but it's really like It's like the it's like the uh, it's like the train of time. It's like you add another cart or something. It's I don't have the best word for it, but the less you do, less different things you do, the quicker time will seem to go by. Not in the moment. In the moment, it goes by slower because you're breaking up um, uh, time. Time will go by slower in the moment if you're doing like uh, nothing. But if you're doing something, then time goes by quicker in the moment, but slower when you look back. Like your experience in the present, it feels like things are happening quicker because there are things happening. So you can't feel things happening if there's nothing happening. So it's a trick of your perspective. And but when you look back, it looks like time just went by, and what did I even do? If you did nothing, you're like, it's been 3 months. How has it been 3 months? I haven't even done anything. It's like because you did nothing, that's why 3 months felt like nothing. Or you haven't not even done nothing, but not done multiple different things. That's what it is. So if all you did was one thing for 3 months, like you're gonna look back and be like, that flew by, even though in the moment you're gonna feel like it's dragging on forever. And so I think about like how these people would experience time, and they and also just what is sleep in general. And sleep, according to sentient singularity theory, because you're an assembly of sentient beings, when you shut and you're the boss, like when you shut down, it's like letting your workers off of work. Your cells can go home, they can take care of themselves, they can eat, they can rest, and then that leads to them being able to come back to work the next day and do whatever it is that you tell them. Pick up that water bottle, eat, digest that food, see that um, uh, rainbow, I don't know, whatever it is that you're looking at, listen to that sound. Like these are things that your cells, these are their jobs. They need to be let off the clock sometimes. But if you're severed in the way that Severance, the workers in Severance are, you like have no time that you perceive off the clock. You have it, and it replenishes your cells, and physically, yeah, you'll like be rested, but you don't actually have the perception of um, of like uh, of differentiating between times. Like these people are in a basement basically. They don't even see the sun. And where I work now, my office for the first time doesn't have a window in it. I have I have kind of like a secondary office, which is really just a desk in another room that sometimes I can work in, and there's windows in that office. But this is my main office, and it's also my studio, and there's no windows, and that's very helpful for a studio. But for an office, I thought it would be helpful because I wouldn't get distracted. That's not true at all. Actually, it's made it so that I'm not aware of what time it is, and it like has impacted my entire perspective of time. To move somewhere, not have to get up and drive to a commute and then come back, and then it's like you're just in one spot. And there's ways to deal with it. I started going for walks after work with my wife, and like that, then you can see the sun and what time it is, and you can go out there at lunchtime and hang out with my daughter or whatever. But like, you have to make the conscious effort to do it. You have to leave the space that doesn't have any internal inputs that gives you additional context of the timing of things. So it's time is not an objective thing. It is a subjective thing. There's a super subjectivity to time that is relevant to like hierarchies. Like God maneuvers in time because he can't maneuver in space because he is the space that we inhabit. But we maneuver in space, not really in time. We feel subject to time, which is really what it is we feel we are subject to the timing. It's a better way of putting it, of the being that we're within. The timing of the actions of the being that we're within. And so in my models, there's a model of space-time, and there's a model of time space, and but it really should be like space timing and timing space or something. It's like um, timing is a better term than time for what time really is. It's but you need to know the context of time, which is like you need to know your relationship with the being that you're within, and like the how you're composed of beings um, uh, that you need to let off the off the job, and in order to go to sleep. People have been wondering what is the job of sleep for for so long. They're like, is it for the sake of memories? How does sleep help you convert short-term memory to long-term memory? It's probably not a chemical process so much as it is a perceptual definer. Like it adds context to the memories, and that context is of a memory. That context places it as not something that has happened anymore because I went to sleep and woke up. And so it's not happening now. It's something that happened. And I went to sleep and I woke up. And like there's this line, this event that we add to this chain that, of perception and experience. And so you sit there, we sit there and we're like, oh, what's going on in your brain when you sleep to help convert short-term memories to long-term memories? Probably not that important. Not saying nothing is going on, but it's probably more so about like what are the sentient beings that are the molecules in your mind, and the sentient beings that are the cells in your mind, and the sentient beings that are the even the atoms in your mind. Like what are they doing when you're sleeping? It's not about like this I don't know, chemical process with that has nothing to do with anyone's perspective and relationships. It's all about someone's perspectives and relationships, and someone's, meaning plural, like the someones of yourselves, the someone of yourself, the someone of the people around you, even, and the someones of the molecules that make up your cells, etc. But it's just adding like an event that allows you to orient. And additionally, it's additional context. But sleeping it's for the same reason as like why you can't work all the time. It's like you will lose the ability to make order in your space that is you. That space that is you is like your home, including of your home. And I say this all the time on here, is like you are a mind, and your mind is kind of expanded into all the tools in your life too, that are your tools, especially. And like the things that make up your mind are the tools that are constantly with you. And that's your house, and so before I do a stream, I organize my desk and stuff in here, because it was like a bit of chaos in here before the stream, and I vacuumed uh, uh, and cleaned up Amazon boxes that had to be thrown out, and just organized my desk a bit, because it helps you organize your thoughts, and because it's organizing information in that you're processing. That's what you're doing. And so your home is your constant. Your home base is your constant. Like that is part of you. Doesn't mean it can't change, but like it's still part of you no matter what. You move to a different house, like it's still, that new house is now part of you. It is the thing that you use. It is the tool that you use every day for almost everything in your life. It's like, it's not just a hammer. It's like, it's the tool that you use to keep the hammer in, and to build things with the hammer, and to eat so that you have the energy to build things with the hammer, and sleep so you have, the sense to build things with a hammer. It's like all encompassing. It's a space for me of where I get my work done, and it's also the space in which I spend time with my family and take care of my daughter and help my wife. And so when you are not allowed to focus on that space that you use to do everything, because you're only allowed to focus on the space that you use and the tools that you use to do a specific thing, like your job. You're not allowed to go home and clean your house and make order in your space, your space, and you're only making order in the space of someone else, which is like on the job essentially. Then you lose order in your space, and you lose the ability to be orderly in every space, because that space that is your space, like your home and your car and your desk and your office and whatever, it is the space that you use to accomplish tasks in every other space. It's like your foundational space. And so when you sleep, you let your cells make order in their foundational space, which is themselves, their own selves, the relationships that they have that are, fundamentally required, the partnerships that they have, the things like that, that are not work in the, like, when I move my arm, but like they are work, like, making sure that, I don't know, your heart keeps beating or something. It's like that marriage. It's like marriage work. It's like homework. And if they can't have the time to take care of that stuff too, then they will lose the ability to be orderly in every space. If they can't have the chance to make order in their space. But this trickles down from you to cell, to molecule, to atom, to hadron, and it trickles up as well. So, but it's really that it trickles down because there's a directionality. Because if I say move my arm, like all my cells have to follow the order because I'm the boss. And so this type of sentient singularity theories framework makes sleep make tons of intuitive sense, hopefully, if I'm explaining it well. But it also is relevant to, like, what would it be like if you, like, these people, they don't have a perception of their home, but they do go home, and they don't remember their home when they're at work, but like in the show, but they do go home and shower and sleep and have their relationships with their family, and then they go back to work and they forget it all. And their workday feels like endless. They don't have any days that are objective. And or subjective day. Subjective day would be like when you go to sleep and then you wake up. It's like in between the sleep blocks is a subjective day, and then in between, but then we have this kind of like outside looking in. That's from the inside looking out, but from the outside looking in, we also have this perception of the day, which is like 24 hours, and an hour is a rising sun and setting sun split up into even block that then comes from the solar system and stuff like that. But it's really just an agreed upon. It's like a collectively agreed upon metric. It's not actually from the sun. It's like from us. We chose like to define some things like that. But we didn't choose a day to be like this. The subjective day is actually something you don't choose. It's just something you experience. And I guess the super subjective day would be like the sun rising and setting. It's like it just dictates rhythm of process of life. Subjective versus objective are based on the laws of nature. I find them as portals. I've also found that in every single portal, and I mean every portal, Obi-Wan has the high ground. Oh, in the stories, there's only one story. Yeah, Obi-Wan always has the high ground. Think about Batman Begins. Even it's like when he's like, training against Ra's al Ghul and at the beginning, and he's like, you haven't beaten me, you sacrificed your footing, and he's just like, to not have the footing that you need is to not have the high ground. Same thing. And he's also an orphan. Like Bruce Wayne is also an orphan. It's just, and so is Superman. Think about Superman. Superman is an orphan. He leaves his family. It's the same story because it's the story that makes sense to our minds because of the structure of our minds. That's trippy. It's super trippy. You are important. Yes, you are. Watch out for red flag holes unless you are the world. I don't know what you mean by that. Do you subvert existing knowledge structures to access a deep authenticity? That's such a fascinating question, actually. I don't know how many of you realize like how fascinating a question that is, but I don't think so. But I do think that it can easily go wrong where you do that. But you do that to existing knowledge structures. That's not true. To access deep authenticity, you can subvert existing knowledge structures, but that's only if the existing knowledge structures are not based on that which is fundamental. If they are, then no, that's not what happens. But if they are based on that which is fundamental, then to access deep authenticity is to perceive why that existing knowledge structure is the way that it is. But to access deep authenticity or deep truth, it will also allow you to perceive the falsehood of some existing knowledge structures that are not fundamentally true. And we're going to talk about some of those more deeply later this year. I'm working on that. I've talked about them on some live streams, some of them on some live streams before, but I have some produced videos about some of those specific structures and our understandings of certain things, just current assumptions that are not fundamentally based in truth or not based in fundamental truth. Not saying they aren't based in kind of like detached, kind of false or context. They are contextualized within assumed falsehoods, but they are not based on fundamental truths. And in that case, like, yeah, you do end up subverting those. As you realize truth, you subvert falsehood. But you don't really, it's not even that you subvert falsehood. Like to subvert is to like, let's look it up. It's like to destroy. Undermine the power or authority of an established system or institution. To destabilize, where that's not really what's happening. When you perceive deep truth or deep authenticity, what it is that you realize that you can allow that which is not deeply authentic and deeply true or fundamentally true to fall apart. But you're not destroying them. They are not capable of being self-sustaining. And so they fall apart when you get rid of the false foundations that they are composed of or built on, I guess is a better way of putting it. So it seems like you subvert existing knowledge structures, but you don't. I don't think you can unless you're subverting something that's true with something that's false. And even then, you can't do that forever. And you can only do that when people are lacking the necessary information that would allow the perspective that the fundamentally true perspective to stand on its own. It's like they've already. It's like people who are religious. Who I met. It's funny because I was an anti-theist for a majority of my life, and then I had a lot of friends who were theists for the majority of their. They claimed to be theists the majority of their lives, and then, like when I became a theist, when I realized theism, they started to question theism, and they then fell out of it. And I would say they almost really didn't ever really have it. Like they don't have a complete view. It's not that somebody tricked them. It's like they didn't have enough understanding to not get confused, which means like they were confused from the start. It just wasn't apparent. And I had a lot of friends who were, came from religious families, and then when they were in their mid-20s, late 20s, they just were like, I can't believe I believed that, like, God existed. And this was like right before I became a theist. And even afterwards, some people tell me this, and I'm like, that means you didn't really believe it. It's not even that you didn't believe it; you weren't aware of it. You trusted it, just like I trust, and you trust that certain things that we learned in school are true, but like we don't really know. And it's like, I don't know what's something that there are tons of things that you trust in school that you have no idea. But you learn about history. History is one of those things that's like constantly you're just trusting the word of someone else, who's trusting the word of someone else, who's trusting the word of someone else, and it's like you don't really know. Somebody recently said to me, they were like, I can't believe in school we learned this, and I can't believe I believed all that, and they but now I know the truth. Like now I know what really happened in World War II and World War I, and in the Neolithic era or something. It's like you don't really know what happened in World War I or World War II or the Neolithic era. You never did. You didn't know it then, and you don't know it now. You assumed then, and now you're assuming again. And it's like almost more dangerous to be like, I didn't know, and now I know. It's like, no, you didn't know then, and you don't know now. You just found something that makes a little bit more sense for some reason, and maybe it is true. But the point is that you're still trusting secondhand information above firsthand information, and sometimes you have to trust secondhand information is true, but it should never override firsthand information, and you should always recognize when it is secondhand information and not put that much trust on it. And so, like I said, that's the beginning of insanity. People say, oh, it's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Maybe that's an okay definition of insanity, but another definition is, I think one of the most fundamental definitions of insanity, if not the most fundamental definition of insanity, is to prioritize secondhand information above firsthand experience. That is insanity. I like subversives. So knowledge structures are sort of safety parameters for idiots. You could not for idiots. There is no such thing as an idiot. Everyone has moments of idiocy, and everyone has moments of genius. Some people have more of one or the other, but there is no one who is an idiot, and there is no one who is a genius. Genius is a moment that everyone can experience, and so is idiocy is a moment that everyone does experience. But our knowledge structures safety parameters for people who are ignorant of some, I don't know, some activity or some knowledge. Yes, they can be that, but and it's not for idiots. It's for people who are ignorant. But but everybody's ignorant on different things, and everybody's is ignorant of many things. So it's like I know a lot about certain things and have a lot of experience about certain things. I'm also ignorant about certain things. It's very easy to overcome ignorance by just recognizing it. As soon as you recognize that you're ignorant, you're no longer ignorant. It's the assumption that you're not ignorant when you are ignorant that is actual ignorance. As soon as you're like, yeah, I actually don't know, I have no experience with that. But it's hard to do because like we think that we have experience with things like, you know, I don't know, like I know a lot about firearms and martial arts and of all kinds. I also know what is on TV, and if you know about firearms from TV or martial arts from TV, um, and not from personal experience, you don't actually know about it. You just think you do. Or you can just recognize that you only know what you know from TV and that that's not actually firsthand experience. And so therefore that you don't really know it. And then now you're not ignorant anymore. You're not wise about it, but you are not ignorant either. You recall your authority. Yeah, exactly. If a theater actor reads a script and acts the directions but doesn't understand the play, that would be like how the majority of people live. No, it's not how the majority of people live. It's how it's how we are with the majority of with many of our actions. I don't even want to say majority in there. It's how all of us are with many of our actions. It's not how the majority of people live. But yes, I know what you're saying, kind of. There are definitely people that in certain things are very much just like accepting of the establishment narrative. You know, I have family members that just accept what the news says. You know, I have some family members that accept exactly what Fox News says, and that's it. And like, then I have family members that accept exactly what CNN says, and that's it. And neither one is wiser than the other, even if one of them, you know, gets it right on certain things when the other one doesn't. They're not really right. They're just, you know, they're just lucky almost, but they're not wise. It's like who you vote. It's like how you vote has nothing to do with whether or not you're wise. Little to do with it. It's why you vote, or like why is your politics the way that it is. It should be based on firsthand experience, not what your family says, not what the TV says, not what you heard going on the other side of the world, but what is your personal life experience with certain issues. And like that's what it should be essentially based on. But at least just a broad overview idea. Everything else should be like left to the people. If you don't have personal experience with an issue, you should leave it to the people who do. Perhaps they may be content in that. And though I thought I would want to be corrected, a few people take it well when told something jarring to their state of comfort. Oh yeah, that's definitely true. That's true of all of us. It's a skill that you develop to be able to be self-aware enough and also be like, why, I guess, just receptive enough to like criticism, to honestly receptive enough to criticism. It's an active thing. It's not a reactive thing. It's not like I'm gonna listen to you. It's like no. I'm going to assume you're right. One of the first models I made of thinking, as I've shown on here before many times, is this right here. This is my work document, so there's a lot of tabs and it's a lot of just work. Don't think this is not like final stuff. This is like years of just notes. But every like year I make a new document and save like the latest updated models. But you can see models, some of which are work in progress and some of which are pretty much done on my website, sentientsingularity.com. But this is like right here. This is like how this is the decision tree of your like AI algorithm. This is how to think though, and uh, which is you have to reject the current default status or the assumed default status and assume the opposite of your default status is true and then look for evidence of that. So if somebody says this is the way that things are and it's different from what you assumed prior to the conversation, if you're actually going to think about the issue, you actually have to assume that you're wrong and that what not just that you're wrong, but that the opposite opinion that is your default, or the opposite assumption that is your default, is true. So if you think the earth is, if you want to think about like the shape of the earth, if you want to actually think about it, you can't, if somebody's like the earth is flat and you assume it's round or sphere, you can't be like, oh, well, no, actually it's a sphere because like of this and this and this and this. And you can't look for evidence that confirms what you currently assume. You have to assume that what's true is the opposite of your default assumption. So if you think it's a sphere and that's your default assumption, you have to now assume it's flat. You have to look for evidence that it's flat. You can't look for evidence that it's a sphere and critically actually think, genuinely think about what the shape of the earth is. You have to, if you think it's flat, then you have to assume the opposite of that is true and assume it's a sphere and then look for evidence that it's a sphere. If you think it's a sphere, if your assumption is it's a sphere, then you have to truly think about the issue. You have to assume it's flat and look for evidence that it's flat. So this is actually the only way to think. The scientific method is the externalization of this process. The thinking process is the internalization of this process, which is just, it is information. That's the process. It is information. It's like informing. It's like information, which is like information in context, which is context that is informing you. But it's like an active thing. It's like a structure / process. That's what it means to be a mind, is to think. As soon as you stop thinking, you're not a mind anymore. Okay, we should wrap it up. It's been a while, guys. It's been a really long time. Oh my gosh. Perhaps they may be. Memories are always projections through your filters. They are always subjective. What you are is more than what you do. That's true. You are what you do, and also you are the doer. Or you are the doer, not necessarily what you do. You are the doer. Do you agree that when you are tapping into an authentic mode of being, God is pleased? Yes, I do. If you are tapping into truth, then you're tapping into God, and God likes when you are aligned with him. Just as you like when people are aligned with you. I hope, but can't say for certain. I feel nice though that's a good indication. Good. Don't worry about what God thinks. I behave in alignment with nature. That's what is, I don't know what that means. Nature is in alignment with God. Generative nature is in alignment with God. Growth is in alignment with God. Should be in alignment with growth. Growth of sentience. I don't know about what God thinks I behave. Yes, a lot of what you are espousing in regards to subverting the will brings to mind Nietzsche. I'm sure to some degree. I mean, he had a lot of genius thoughts, and some idiotic thoughts, just like everyone else. What leads you to conclude God is pleased? I think you can feel it, and when you feel like you are being meaningful and you're actions are impacting others. And your God is the only being. I'll end on this. God is the only being, or the only one who has ever existed who is actually at some point meaningless. You have always been meaningful. God had to choose to intentionally create you and go against his nature of oneness to create multiplicity in order to partition his beingness into a multiplicity that is you, and so and me and everyone else. It is inevitable that was a choice by God. Why? Why would you want to be self-aware and also meaningless and eternal? God can't even kill himself if he tried. It's just, existence is an internally coherent, self-referential, self-contained information system. It means it is totally self-aware and it is eternal because existence exists. It cannot not exist because non-existence does not exist. Would you want to be an eternal, meaningless being? Or would you want to maximize your meaning and also entertainment but really fundamentally meaning? I do think God is entertained by us, but he is also definitely, as soon as God created others and we are all created within God, now he is the most meaningful being that exists. Every one of us owes our lives, our existence to him. But prior to creation of multiplicity, God was the only being that actually experienced meaninglessness. He was also the only being that actually was ever alone in existence. He didn't just feel lonely. He was alone. He didn't just feel meaningless. He was meaningless. He is now all meaningful because everybody else owes their entire existence to him. And he is also not alone at all because he perceives all of us. We're never alone. We just feel lonely. We've never been meaningless. We just feel meaningless. And so God wants to I believe God created multiplicity primarily, probably for multiple reasons, but primarily to maximize meaning. Because who wants to be meaningless and alone forever and ever? That would suck. It wouldn't feel like a long time, but it would feel like no time. It would just be like bored, ultimate boredom, and also just depression, probably. But you are not in the universe. You are the universe, intrinsic part of it. You are in the universe and part of the universe. It's both. Inside means separate and one, per the 4 primary perspectives that we showed earlier. So you're in the universe, you're separate and one with the universe. You're not one with the universe and not separate from the universe. You are separate and one with the universe. Anyways, thank you, everyone. Please hit the like button. If you found this valuable, share it. I don't even know how long we've been going on, but I've been trying to keep it to under 3 hours, and this was not it. But I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was meaningful to you. And please hit the like button and share it and comment any questions you have below. Subscribe if you haven't, and hit the bell notification. I have weekly talks on my Discord. Send me a private message on Instagram if you'd like to join one of those calls. And also the link to the show Severance is below, and you should check it out. It's very good. Anyways, thanks. Peace.